Welcome everybody to the Verts Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Sonny Weaver. We got a big day for you guys today. I'll get to our guest in a second, but I want to go ahead and announce the details of our next Madden 17 giveaway. This is the 7th Madden 17 giveaway NBL has been sponsoring so far in this cycle. For this giveaway, simply all you have to do is go ahead and subscribe to the NBL Network YouTube channel. And at the bottom of this video, go ahead and comment and say you want Madden 17. The nice thing about this giveaway is it is a digital download code, meaning it can be for PlayStation 4 or Xbox. It hasn't been purchased yet. We'll purchase that upon your request. So make sure you go ahead and subscribe and comment on this video, as well as any other comments you have about the video, but mention that you do want a copy of Madden 17. So to the interview itself, we've got a special guest today. You guys may know him as the creative director of Madden 17. I look at him as the savior of Madden itself. Rex Dickson is in the house. How you doing, Rex?
Good, thank you. That was very nice of you to say.
Hey, you know what? It's interesting. I've gotten to be in the development side of things. I've been in the marketing side of things when it comes to technologies. It's hard to be a developer because there's a lot of stuff that goes unnoticed. But I appreciate the effort you guys have put in, and I appreciate the transparency. As we talked about before you came on the show here, you guys have been great this cycle. Our developers interview series so far, we've gotten to talk to 5 or 6 of your guys. They've all been great, very forthcoming about what's going on within the development process. So I really want to stress how appreciative myself as well as NBL we are in what you guys do, because we feel like you guys are heading in the right direction. So I'm not sure enough people really get a chance to say that to you.
That's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and tackle a couple of these topics. First off, Madden 17, we're just a couple days here from EA Access. Very excited about that. A little over a week out from release. What's it feel like right now to be a developer of one of the top titles that drops each and every year? You're kind of in the last couple hours here. You're getting down to the wire. Are you guys just calm and collected, ready to roll out? Are you still scrambling to get some things done? What's it like right now inside of EA?
Oh, good question. I would say this year things are a little bit calmer, and probably the biggest reason for that is we did. I don't know if we've even publicly announced this, but I'll talk about it anyway. We did a very small closed beta this year, and what that means is a bunch of our the close game changers, people who've been working with the development team for quite some time, or trusted external sources who we use for feedback. We brought about 120 of them into a closed beta this year, which happened, I believe, in June. And we were able to generate tons of bugs and tuning and going back and forth with some of our top feedback providers. So essentially what would normally be our September, October patch, if you remember last year, was all done in July leading into August. So we've actually already patched the game once pre-release, and there'll be more patches coming that basically deal with all the feedback and all the bugs that we found during the beta. So versus last year where we came into launch kind of, I don't like to use this term too much, but flying blind, because you don't ever know until you get out to market. And now we feel like we're a little bit less blind because our game changers have had their hands on this game for a month or so and got us all this feedback, and we were able to action on that feedback prior to launch, versus last year where a lot of these patches didn't even come out until October or November. So a lot of those issues we know about and we were able to fix before launch this year. I will say that a lot of people are out on vacation right now, so there's people getting rest and relaxation. But there's a few of us who are sticking through and doing all the PR and marketing and streaming stuff that's heading up to launch. So, as a developer, this time of year normally, I'm really excited for people to get their hands on the game. But this year in particular, I'm quite nervous because there's just a little bit too much positive energy, and I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, or waiting to know what bomb's going to go off. Because everything that we've heard so far from the beta, from the game changers, from the early reviewers who have their hands on it now, has been overwhelmingly positive. So I'm kind of nervous. It's almost too positive.
So you've got a lot in there. So I'll break down a couple things in there because I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. First thing I want to do is give a shout out to Clint Oldenburg, who's had possibly the travel from hell this week flying. So feel bad for him. He's one of those ones that went on a vacation, I guess, and ended up not
No,
getting
no,
so
no,
much of a
no
vacation.
vacation. Actually, he was out. We sent him to London to go do a press event because we're trying to really break through in that market. He had multiple delays on that trip, and when he got back, he flies out the next day to do a mocap shoot, which he's at now in Vancouver. So he's actually this week, instead of being on the stream, he's going to be shooting mocap for Madden 18.
Well, then I feel even worse for him because you guys sent him there for work. But, it's all good. So let's talk about the beta. Some people were aware of it, some weren't. It's interesting you guys went with the closed beta. Was that in response to some of the issues you guys had at launch last year?
Yes, and also I think when you look around at the marketplace, I don't think the days of not doing a beta are kind of going away. It's almost like every game these days has to do some kind of a beta. And if you look at what happens when games don't get that kind of exposure, I mean, you look at what's happening with the No Man's Sky launch right now, and you think, how much better a position might they be in if they were able to do a beta for a couple months, digest a lot of those bugs and get them fixed before launch versus going out blind and running into sort of all these problems with launch. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer. And, if you want to have successful launch, you don't want to be patching 3 months in or tweeting to people, hey, wait to play our game until we get our patch out. A beta is just something you have to do. Now, the struggle for us was getting people comfortable at EA with it, because while teams like Battlefield and a few of the other big ones have done this before, it's sort of new for a sports team to go after it. FIFA's done it a little bit, so we just kind of followed their model, and it was unbelievably successful. And I think one of the reasons why it was so successful was we targeted very high-level Madden players as well as some of our best feedback providers. So one of the selection criteria for the beta was who's been sending us the best, most constructive feedback throughout the year via Twitter and social media and forums. And we actually targeted those people, our top feedback providers, and pulled them into the beta. And they did not disappoint. Some of these guys wrote us novels of feedback and actionable bugs and everything. They were great.
So the beta thing is interesting, and you mentioned kind of new territory. Now, I'm not sure if you were still there, but there was a time years ago where you guys released almost like an early play demo of it, and I want to say it came maybe early August, where you let them play a couple play nows with 3 or 4 different teams and combinations. I'm not sure you'd consider that a open beta, but have you guys looked at the possibility of a larger scale open beta down the road? Because with NCAA kind of folding, there's now a huge void between July to August that I think may have people just chomping at the bit. And I've noticed maybe some upticks and comments towards you through the last month and a half as we've neared closer to launch.
Yeah, so, open beta, I'm not so sure. The thing that they're worried about, and one of the reasons why we keep it so tight, is policing leaks and people who might try to stream the beta or do something else or post impressions or stuff like that. It's a very real concern for our PR comms team. So it's why you kind of have to do this in a staged process. 1 year we do it small and closed, and if nothing blows up or goes wrong, we'll expand it and make it bigger. But one of the reasons why we don't go that big is because we need a pretty tight communication loop with people in the beta. We need a way for them to report stuff to us and for us to then, go back to them and tell them what we're working on or ask their opinions. So there was a lot of communication back and forth. There were surveys sent out. There was write-in stuff. So one of the reasons why we kept it so tight is because it actually demands a lot of the people involved. You kind of have to be an active participant. And one of the things that we've decided is we did pull in some people this year who did not provide extensive feedback for us. I think some people took it as an opportunity to get the game early and I guess lab stuff and figure out new offenses or whatever. Those people will not be invited back into the beta because they basically didn't give us enough value for having them added. So I'd rather swap them out with someone who is going to give constructive feedback versus using the beta to give them a competitive advantage. So we learned, and we'll do better next year.
And that's really all you can expect from anybody when it comes to improving on the process, and that's something you guys I think have done pretty well. One of the questions I've got for you, you said you've had overwhelmingly positive feedback, and so we've heard about all the features, and we've heard some of your takes on it. But really, as you kick back here with the last 2 weeks and you get ready for the release, what's kind of the one feature that makes you smile, and it's almost like people don't even appreciate yet until they play it, how big of an improvement this really is?
Okay, so my obvious go-to answer is commentary, but you don't really need time with the game to appreciate what a difference maker that is. To me, the thing that kind of develops over time is this appreciation for the depth and the balance in the game. This is like I equate Madden 17 to like a woman who gets better the more you date her, the more in love with her you get. Like Madden, back at EA Play, I would say I told people Madden was not my favorite. Madden 17 was not my favorite Madden of all time because it's hard. It demands a lot of you. It kind of forced me to not run the same money plays over and over. And at first I was like, wow, I'm losing on All Pro more than I ever have before. I'm not sure that this is my favorite Madden. But over time, when I started to develop new strategies and the game demanded me to think with more of a football mind, that's when I really saw the true power of what she was. And, 4 months into playing the game, I've been playing the game since March. I love it more every time I play it. It's just one of those things. That's probably my favorite thing about it.
You mentioned your, I guess, almost love-hate with not being able to run the same play. You've kind of gone on record recently and throughout, with some of the issues of people kind of exploiting that AI. And so they introduced new defensive mechanics and so on. Is that kind of a love-hate relationship in itself that, you've got to introduce these things to keep people from exploiting AI, but at the same time you are making it a more immersive football experience?
The two are usually one-to-one. By handling a legacy issue, you're usually attacking that legacy issue with a real-world football system. So when people come at me and say, last year, there's no zone that defends the flats. The Blues don't actually defend the flat. So the way you solve people running drags all day is you put in the actual zone that's supposed to stop drags. In real-world football terms, if you ask a coach, how do you take away a drag with a zone defense, he'll say you run a hard flat. And so we put a hard flat into the game. So the solution to solving the money play is actually adding more football because, when somebody says like, okay, it's 3rd and long, I know that my opponent is going to run 4 verticals with a deep over route from the slot. And for years in Madden, the linebacker will just let that receiver run over the top and catch that ball for a first down. So now by calling a match defense, that linebacker will now match that route. This is a real world football concept, pattern matching, and take it away. And so effectively what we've done is implemented real world football systems to give you the tools you need to counter just about anything anyone is doing. And that fundamentally changes the way the meta of competitive Madden is played.
Do you worry about kind of the backlash from that of making a game that may be too hard for the casual fan?
Yes, I'm terrified. I am absolutely terrified. But a few years back, actually before my time, they had this theme. They had this year where they're like, Madden's gotten too complicated. We need to let people have fun and score. And their theme that year was wide open gameplay. And it was kind of looked back on as not our best effort, and it didn't do as well in the market as some of the others. When myself got in here and Cam Weber and Clint, we drew a line in the sand and said, we're going sim. That's the way we're going. We want authenticity. We want simulation. And so by nature of that, as the game gets more football, it inherently creates more strategy, which means that you can't just play at Twitch anymore. And that does demand a lot of a gamer. But I hold true to this one truth, that if you are able to appeal to your core, the core Madden user, and they think the game is great, and that group has been asking for simulation for years, decades, in fact. Like what I see on Sundays is what I want Madden to be. So we went in that direction, and yes, the game got harder, and people will score less this year. But if you understand football and you use football strategies, you will get more value out of this game than any Madden that come before it. And I think, to me, if it forces casuals to step their game up and actually learn football concepts, that's a win for me. Even if I lose a couple hundred or a couple thousand in the process, I'll take it.
That's got to be a very frustrating position to hold, in the fact that people come at you, and anybody who follows your Twitter, which you really are a great Twitter follower. It's pretty funny to watch you come back at people, but some of the memes are just hilarious. But you've got people on both sides, and I talked about this in a different podcast of the fans not really knowing what they want. So people saw the back of the box features this year and said, well, they didn't introduce any new features, so they're just pandering to casuals, which really makes no sense. A casual doesn't care about new zones. A casual doesn't care about leverage on run plays. A casual doesn't care about the practice squad for that matter. So do you ever find yourself, looking at the fan base and even questioning if they know what they want? Because it's a tough thing. You've got basically 4 games within a single boxed game. You've got your MUT, you've got your online head-to-heads, you've got your franchise, you've got even draft champions. Now, do you ever find yourself going, it's tough designing a game for people that have completely different concepts of what this game really should be?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, Madden is one of those games that has enough modes and it's sort of wide enough that it appeals to varying audiences. And it's big enough, and this would be true of a Call of Duty or GTA 2, where you can start to separate your users into different segments. We call them audience segments or player segments. What this means is all the people playing Madden, how do we break them up into different groups that identify based on what they want or what they need out of the game? So the two common ones, and the main one that I had been chasing from the first 3 years here is simulation. Simulation to me was, if you look on the Operation Sports sites or, the bulk of the forums, you'll see most people talking about wanting a simulation game. It's exactly what I see on Sundays, an exact representation of the sport. But this year, they threw a very funky loop at me when they said, hey, we want to do this new competitive esports thing. And I was like, oh, God, because, previously, if you're talking to me or somebody brings me a bug about a nano blitz or some new playmaker glitch that someone's doing, my opinion had been like, well, that's only affecting the top 2% of Madden players who are playing at a very elite level. I don't really care. But when they're putting that type of game on network television or cable television in front of God knows how many thousands of people, all of a sudden it's not okay anymore that people are winning with glitches. So the whole strategy had to change, and we had to look at all the things that competitive players do to either break or glitch or get an advantage in the game. And really start taking seriously getting those things ironed out, getting them fixed, getting them resolved, restoring sort of balance to competitive Madden instead of it being, whoever has the best ebook or the best nanos is the one who wins. So yeah, serving those two audiences is difficult because usually, although they want sort of, similar things, the way they want it implemented is different. Simulation guys will say, I don't want my Twitch skill to matter as much as my strategy, whereas a competitive guy absolutely wants his Twitch skills to matter above all else. So, when you work on a franchise like this, much like a Call of Duty or GTA, being able to build features that appeal to both audiences so that everybody feels like I got value for my $60, even though like maybe 30% of what they worked on this year doesn't apply to me, at least that 20% that they put into the thing that I care about makes me happy. And that's kind of the balance we have to juggle, is making sure that everybody gets something. We're not in that mode where we can go, hey, let's go all in on MUT this year and completely starve CFM and gameplay. Like, we'll never do that. Every group will push the line forward every single year to make sure that all our different audience segments are satisfied.
Interesting comment there about what you get for your $60. We've been hearing about it, and obviously you released it last or maybe 2 weeks ago about formation subs. And my understanding, or at least what I've taken from some of the other interviews, is this is kind of part of your guys' continuous development philosophy, even if it didn't necessarily fall under that group at this point. Maybe tell us a little bit about the whole continuous development philosophy, because what you get for your $60 when you buy the game may not be what you end up with down the road.
Sure. So strategically, the theory, previously, before like 5 years ago, was why would you ever push a feature out mid-year? Because you can push that to the following year and get credit for it. Essentially, your story in the following year becomes bigger if you push that feature down the line. But we started to learn that there's a lot of value in people playing your game well past its release. So most games will come out, with games with a strong single player will maybe get played for 2 weeks. People put 30, 40, whatever hours into it, and then they'll be done. They'll never touch that game again. There's a few games like Madden, like 2K, like I'd say GTA's multiplayer probably falls in this category, Destiny, where they're building a different model. And the model is we want you to play our game all year long. We want you to immerse yourself in the culture that surrounds our game. And we basically learned that a player who stays throughout the year is much more valuable to us than a player who leaves after playing the game for 2 weeks. And so we started strategizing about like how can we build that model. And one of the key tenets of that model is you have to push out new releases or content updates, not just patches, but new stuff that makes people come back or re-energizes the base to come back in and play. And a great, perfect example of that last year was the salary cap tournament. Got introduced mid-year. It sort of changed the whole meta of competitive Madden. It changed what Draft Champions was, and it re-engaged the whole community around the third Madden challenge. And so that's a great example of continuous development. And we have much bigger plans to move forward with this because it was so successful last year. The struggle is really people trying to attach value to it, because if I'm in marketing or sales, I'm like, well, wouldn't that have made more sense to hold salary cap off till 17 and drive more sales with it as a feature? And we have to come back with, no, we're not going after sales. We're going after retention now. The goal has actually changed. Therefore, the model has to change. That's the heart of continuous development. That's the reasoning behind it. And we have a lot of big plans for it this year. I keep teasing people that we're not done making announcements. And we're almost done making announcements for launch. But after launch, we got a lot more coming.
So let's come back. I told you before I'm not micro, I'm more macro, but I do want to hit on this. So formation subs. RG put out a great article there on Operation Sports about how they're going to work. Obviously, the glaring omission is custom playbooks.
Yep.
Was that a short sight to make sure you got it in with the opportunity to rebuild down the road, or is this the end of the path as far as that formation sub goes?
So the way this went down is that beta that I told you about previously. We sat down with the game changers, primarily the guys who focus on CFM. We asked them what they thought, and the first words out of all of their mouths was, how did you not do formation subs? Like, that's the big missing piece that they all collectively wanted. And so we went back to the dev team and just started discussing and say, what are our options now? It's late in the process. The game is kind of like in its finaling stages now. There's lots of bugs to work through in the patch. The appetite to build a feature in like the month leading up to launch is very difficult to push through. But if we're serious about being community minded and we're serious about listening to the community, and here are all our top game changers from the franchise telling us, like, this is a must-have feature. It is basically a devastating blow to the game that you do not have this. So we went back and said, we have to find a way to make this happen for them. And one of the concessions we had to make to get it in that time period was it only works with franchise. So it won't work in MUT and it won't work with custom playbooks. That is a decision we had to make to ensure we'd have it out for CFM at launch. And while not ideal, it's a decision I'd make again in a heartbeat.
And that right there is one of the things that I think is important to understand. You guys have a very limited amount of time, and you've got limited resources as far as development. And so to try to push something through using a mechanic, in this case, I think it's based off of the franchise coach's playbook. By using a mechanic already there, it got you the ability to do that within that game. And that's something that really should be appreciated, because that easily could have been a back-of-the-box feature that you guys rolled out. But it's something that you took the feedback and you got that into the game. So that definitely is an appreciated course of action there on that.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have happened if the guys who represent the franchise gamers, guys like Shotmaster, Sim Football Critic, Swami, a bunch of others, pushed so hard for it. This is why it's so important to get back to that whole thing about developers listening, because the game changers represent the community. So when the game changers said we need formation subs, we went and did it. And it's we listened to you guys through the game changers, through Twitter, and more than I could ever express to you in this interview, it has absolutely fundamentally impacted the way we develop this game. A huge swing in terms of how this team prioritizes and what they go after, just based on a bunch of us being active on social media now.
Yeah, and that's a good point there as well. You guys are, as a development team, in large on social media. I think I talked to a lot of you guys through Twitter throughout the year, and it's very much appreciated because it lets you get insight on little things that, little bugs here or there, and obviously you guys are getting that feedback, and you're getting instant feedback, and that's something that social media does provide. You mentioned earlier about legacy issues and trying to correct some of those, and I think one that kind of stands out to a lot of people is the non-contact injuries or lack thereof. Looking down the road, obviously that's something that you guys are saddled with, but have you looked at ways almost like the way formation sub, it may not be the best fix, but something to maybe add something? Because, coming from a CFM, my viewers know I'm part of MBL, and we go August to August, and we're all about the full immersion, but even we realize that there's really not a huge need for backup linemen. I mean, really, now with formation subs, maybe to get an extra tackle on goal lines and whatnot, but it seems like a massive hole that's in that game as far as getting fully immersed in that game.
Yeah, I see it come up on the franchise stuff a lot and on OS a lot. There was this thread the other day where people getting all upset about off-ball injuries and they're not going to buy the game because of it. In the grand scheme of things, that's something that Clint and I'll just have to sneak in, because it's one of those things where it's such a hardcore sim feature that I would have trouble convincing my bosses that this is something like we absolutely have to do this, because off-ball injuries to them is going to sound like a really hardcore simulation feature, versus like the stuff that they get excited about. I talk about this all the time in interviews. I have to do a lot of in my job, split up the features that they call back of backs marketable versus the really hardcore sim features, which they don't think are marketable. You should have seen us struggle this year trying to explain to marketing what the benefits of gap play were. It was a nightmare of just like us trying to break it down in simple terms, or just like, you know what, let's just change the whole context of this and talk about defenders doing their job. They're like, we love it. That sounds like that Patriots thing. Do your job. We're like, yes, go with that. Run with it. And that kind of stuff happens all the time around here, because you got to think those guys are thinking about an audience that's 6-7 million people large, where we think about this core community that's maybe a couple 100,000. So it's just different perspectives, but that would fall into that category. Clint and I are aware of it. He's actually been pushing for offensive line injuries for 2 years now. I just have to let him get to it.
So my recommendation is walk in there with your MBL Network t-shirt on. I know you never take it off. I've seen a lot of videos of you wearing it. Walk in there with your MBL Network t-shirt, point to the shirt and say, those are the guys. And it really is interesting. As we've done this more and more, we've now filled up 2 leagues. We go 2 leagues strong, August to August. And as we've done this and we've started engaging with the community more, I think you're finding that it's really not hard to fill those leagues August to August anymore. And you guys see the data. I mean, are you guys seeing that data that CFMs are lasting longer as you guys tend to put more into them?
Yes, and more than just CFM, the whole game is we call them session days. It's like the number of days in which you put the disc in the tray and turn the machine on. That's been going up every year since Madden 15, and going up by a pretty wide margin. And it kind of, if you look at Madden franchise across the last 3 years, almost every category has gone up. The game is obviously improving, getting better. Sentiment from the community gets up. There's not one stat that I could look at that went down over the last 3 years. They're all going up. So, there is a thought around here that, hey, this plan is working. But, we still aren't sure what that idea is that gets us back to the 10 million we used to sell back in the Gen 2 days, or if this is just like a long slog. And once people realize that Madden is consistently 85 plus, they'll all start coming back. Like all those lapsed people will come back. But yeah, that's a big part of it.
So you've made big strides, and I've heard interviews with you in the past talking about kind of your long-term plan. And if I've timed this up right, you're getting towards the back end or you're finishing out kind of that first set. As you look back at where you started and where you've come to, you know, where do you think, you know, you've improved the most? But I think everybody has to be critical of themselves at times. Where do you think you've still left something on the table that, you know, in the next round, you really want to make sure that's where you get it done?
Oh, good one. So the area where I'm happiest with is just simulation. How much the game is more about real football than Madden ball now. But in terms of like, I think biggest regret, for me personally, it would probably be our animation system. We've spent a lot of time trying to like clean up post play, clean up pops, like little foot slides. It's just the size of that problem is so large because you know hundreds and thousands of animations are built on the system, and then the AI system is telling them to do one thing, and the animation system saying, "I don't know if I can do that," and then so we just warp and pop. Everything from suction to robotic-looking movements to post-play cleanup, just kind of this global thing around the smoothness of the players moving is probably the one area where I think we spent a lot of time, and I still don't feel like we're where I want the game to be. So that'd be my one thing that looking back, I wish we could have gotten a little bit further or done a little bit better job of.
So that sounds like an engine issue, and I'm not going to walk you into that corner because you've taken enough costing over.
Wait,
over
but that's a good point. It's unfair to assume, like, talking from a developer perspective, it's too easy to blame the engine. It's never the engine's fault. The engine is just a tool. This is actually a much deeper and multifaceted problem. It's years of people, putting in things one way, and then new systems come in, and it causes problems with the old way. But the biggest thing in my experience here has been when the AI in football, the AI has to tell the game, the players to move very quickly. They have to adapt to changing conditions and change direction based on a different input. There's times when this guy's getting, the players are getting 4 or 5 instructions over the space of a second. Of course he's going to ping pong and wobble back and forth because, his brain can't tell him what it wants him to do. That has nothing to do with the engine. That's all just smart design and cleanup. And, I look at it kind of like cleaning up a house. There's no shortcuts. You have to go room by room, area by area, sweep, dust, mop. There's no shortcuts there. You just have to fight your way through it and get it done. And that's kind of how I feel about that problem. So, I mean, in no way am I saying that that's an Ignite engine problem that will be solved if we swap engines. There's no short, quick solution to that. It is just like put some bodies against it and fight until you get to the place you want to be.
Yeah, and so Christians use this analogy a little bit, though, that it's like a house, and you got to start from building the foundation and so on. While a new engine doesn't fix it, it does give you the opportunity to design your new house and build that new house from the bottom up to eliminate some of those issues of people adding on over time and doing things different way. And I know when development teams changes, obviously everybody's got their own way of doing things, so that could be an issue. So that was probably more of where I was going, is you get an opportunity to lay it out in your own way, almost like I said, like design a new house.
Yep.
So moving along a little bit, I want to talk about something that is probably a hot topic that gets way more fuss than it deserves, and that's attributes. Couple things with attributes. You guys have been the most transparent development team in a long time, but the one place that seems like it's still lacking a little bit in transparency is that what attributes do. Obviously, there's some logical connections you can make with certain things, but we know it goes deeper than what you would just assume from reading the name of the attribute logically. Now, we've moved to an RPG style XP system, but we don't always know what we're putting XP into to really improve.
Yep.
Is that something that you guys have ever considered maybe diving a little deeper in releasing? Obviously, you have to have your secret sauce. You're not going to give away formulas and mathematical ways that you work things out, but something like this is used in the, in the initial blocking mechanic. This is, just something to let you know, hey, I'm dumping a bunch of XP in here and it's not even really doing what I think it's doing.
Yep. Okay, so this has been a long-term project of mine because when I got here, I obviously asked the same question, like, what do all these ratings do? Where's the formulas? And I took a look at the document that they put together and I said, this is not complete. And I said, we need to go and make sure that this thing is complete and accurate. But when you think about a game that had 27 years of iteration behind it. Now, granted, there's not code from those old days here, but there's so many pieces that have been put in over the years that basically what I have to do is have one of my engineers go through and sift through the code for every version of each stat and figure out if it's attached to any formulas or outcomes. And that is a long, painstaking process that doesn't actually get me any features. But we've been slogging away at it for the past 2 years with the goal of getting to a point where we have an accurate full map of every single formula and every rating and what it's attached to. Once we have that, I can then take that and work with PR and comms to basically clean it up and make it user-facing and make it digestible. And then we could put something out. So that isn't the plan. I just don't know when we'll get to it because I personally have been unwilling to pull someone off feature work to go chase that down, as important as we know it is. So expect some additional clarity over the next couple of years until I get to a point where I feel comfortable releasing that full Bible of all the ratings and what they're attached to and what they actually do.
That's good news. I think the running joke now is it's been running so long, we're not even sure people at EA know what everything actually does. But to kind of what you just said, because it's been around so long, there could be some hidden, attributes doing things that are so, buried back there that no one really does know. And so it's good to know that you guys are trying to mine that out and continue what you guys have been working forward. And that's just transparency on that. So much appreciated on that. Now, when we talk attributes, you guys implemented this year for CFM full player editing. As ratings release come out, it's one of the more anticipated times of the year. And we had Dustin on and we talked a little bit about the process, and not severely in depth, but a little bit about the process. There's a large movement of people, and obviously you read OS, so you know this, that wonder why you guys haven't looked in an age of analytics to move to one of these rating services as possibly a starting point to then work off of and maybe monitor those stats with chips going into shoulder pads and so on, and knowing the speeds of players running on the field and how well they're running their routes and so on. It would seem that we're at a point in time where attributes could be compiled in a more analytical standpoint other than just watching game film.
Yeah, so you'd have to think about, like, there's lots of services out there, and we've used them in the past. But if you actually sift through them and follow some of these rating services, people call as much subjective bullshit on them as they do on us. It's no matter where you turn, it's subjective. No matter how you approach it, different teams grade outcomes differently. It's not an exact science, and generally players don't run 40s once they get in the league. So, how do you know what their speed is doing? Now, with Donnie Moore leaving, the charge we gave to Dustin and this other girl Erica who works on ratings for us is to not use one source, but use as many sources as you can. In other words, cross-reference your data with other services, and then check it against your own stuff. We actually work with the NFL as well. We have multiple services that can send us data. It's the job of these guys to then take that data, cross-reference it against each other, and come up with something that makes sense. But we have yet to work with any external provider where we feel like their data, their telemetry set is better or more accurate than anyone else's. So for the time being, it's going to be a collection of services that we use to cross-reference our results.
So when you look at those attributes and you look at that job, um, is it a benefit to have somebody in house that understands how those attributes affect the game? Because obviously, when somebody tells you, this guy has this or that, it's tough without them understanding the context of the game. So, is there an added advantage of having a developer actually working on those attributes?
I don't think it would be possible to do it any other way. He's constantly talking to the devs about what's changing this year, what's important this year, what are the min-max thresholds. Like for example, last year there was a Jadeveon Clowney card in Mutt who had like 90-something acceleration or speed, and he was actually faster than the offensive lineman. So he could just basically loco right in. It was a big part of the last tournament. That's what we call a restriction problem. Like we had known, if Clinton had known that they were thinking about putting a defensive lineman in with 97 speed, he could immediately flagged it and said, like, that's going to be a problem. Like a D tackle should never have that fast of speed. So there's a lot of back and forth and making sure we don't make those mistakes. And Dustin is probably one of the better versed guys we have in terms of what the rating Bible does, what the ratings are attached to, what they mean. I don't think anyone who didn't understand those things and wasn't linked with the dev team and working with them on a day-to-day basis could do the job, because everything you do in ratings affects gameplay.
So I want to make one more shift here and then end on a more of a personal question, but third-party, applications and things, we've seen Coach's Glass, and you guys kind of pushed that for a while and then it fell to the back burner. And same thing happened with the CFM website. And it looks like you guys have made some attempts there. Is there a place for those kind of third-party add-ons, outside of the game to really have a place? Obviously, there's websites like Daddy Leagues that allows guys like us who run CFMs to do something with it. But is there a place for even other add-ons? Like I said, like that Coach's Glass that I think a lot of us enjoyed, but I'm sure that most people didn't even know it existed. So it was one of those things that really didn't get a ton of play on it.
So, yes, there's interest there. I don't think we've had the right idea yet. Would be my position. So I don't have any news on any of that now. I just think, when you look at that stuff and the history of it and how it's gone, I think it needs to be probably more of an area of focus for us. And we need to pick the right strategy and then stick with it and continue to invest over it year over year. Now, that said, strategically, I don't have any specific news for you on that topic at this time.
Well, it's appreciated, obviously. Rex, you've been great with this. Before you go, I do want to ask you one last question here. So I've been fortunate as I've interviewed everybody to kind of pick up on their favorite teams. Rex, who's your favorite team?
So I grew up in North Jersey. I was a Giants fan as a kid, but I was a Jets fan, and I probably still am, although I'm still mad at them for what happened with Tim Tebow. We went through a nasty breakup, but we're talking again. She might let me move back in, not sure. Still thinking about where I want to go. But yes, I'm a Jets fan who's like recovering from a hard breakup.
So I noticed you recently were posting pictures of playing with the Jaguars. Was that correct?
Yes. So that's because I was playing against Kat and she chose the Raiders first. And I thought, well, I'd be a dick if I chose the Panthers, which are my go-to team this year. And because she chose the Raiders, so I figured I should choose someone who's about parity with the Raiders. And then she smoked me. The Jags did not have the playbook I was hoping for.
So this answer is a good question for me because I was always curious about this. Obviously, Jake's a Bucks fan, and Christian, I think, is a Detroit fan, and I feel bad for him. And I think John said he's Falcons. I was always curious where you fell in that because obviously you're a transplant down south. I was curious if you picked up on the Jaguars as your team or if that just happened to be a Madden team you were using there.
I actually flirted with the Dolphins, the Bucks, and the Jaguars my first 2 years here, but I failed to commit to any one of those teams. So I've kind of tucked my tail between my legs and gone back to the Jets and hope that they have me.
So you've obviously gotten to play with all the teams. Who is your sneaky team this year that may be a little bit underrated when you're flipping through the team page, but a team that somebody should check out if they want to get a good team?
The Rams. The Rams defensive line is something ridiculous in this year's game. They blew me out like several times because their defensive line was just crushing my offense. And then when I played with them, and as people in the community will tell you, I'm famous for using the D line because I'm terrible at user lurking the secondary. And if you use the D line, the Rams are the team for you. Between Quinn and Donald, you have two dominant players right there. And then on Austin, on offense, Jared Goff can get it done, and they got Tavon Austin. A lot of fun to play with this year. That's my sleeper team this year is the LA Rams.
How scary is that offensive line, though? Because that is something that definitely needs a little work out there.
Yeah, get that ball out quick. It's funny because people were complaining about some of the videos saying the pass rush didn't get in fast enough, and my comment to them was, play the Rams. You'll see.
Well, that makes me feel a little better about having a good offensive line this year in our CFM. Rex, I don't want to hold you all night, but you've been great. Like I mentioned, obviously the transparency is much appreciated from the league and our league and other leagues like it. So, keep doing what you're doing, man, and we'll make sure to try to get you on again later on in the year.
Appreciate it. And definitely to all your users and listeners, we want to appreciate your continued support of the franchise. It means a lot to us.
Once again, I'd like to thank Rex, obviously coming on here. As always, being transparent in what they do. Got to appreciate the information. Some good nuggets there to look over and think about. So that's all the time we have for today. Just another quick reminder, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to MBL Network. Also, comment in this video that you want a free copy of Madden 17. Doesn't matter if you're a PS4 player or an Xbox One, we've got you covered. So make sure you subscribe to the MBL Network and comment in this game you want Madden 17. That's all the time we have for today. I'm Sonny Weaver. This has been the Verts Podcast, and we will see you next week.